People underestimate how much uncertainty there really is at the edge of progress. From the outside, it can look like confidence, momentum, even inevitability. From the inside, it's mostly ambiguity, incomplete data, deadlines that don't care how ready you feel, pressure that doesn't announce itself, it just shows up and stays. The personality that fits this world doesn't need certainty to function. They can move forward while still asking hard questions. Some people need clarity before they act. They want guarantees, stable conditions, predictable outcomes. That works in environments designed to protect comfort. It doesn't work when you're trying to do things that haven't been done before. What matters here is the ability to stay rational when the answer isn't obvious and calm, when the path keeps shifting. That kind of person doesn't romanticize chaos, but they don't fear it either. They understand that uncertainty isn't a flaw in the process. It is the process. When things go wrong, they don't take it as a personal failure or an emotional crisis. They treat it as information, something to learn from, adjust around, and keep moving. What stands out most is how they handle sustained pressure. Not a burst of stress, but the long, grinding kind that comes from carrying responsibility over years, not weeks. They don't need constant reassurance or dramatic release. They know how to pace themselves, how to recover quietly, how to stay useful when the situation is demanding. This isn't about being fearless, it's about being functional under load, about not letting uncertainty turn into paralysis or pressure turn into noise. When someone can do that consistently, they stop being a liability and start becoming leverage. Because the future doesn't require certainty, it requires people who can operate without it. One of the fastest ways to slow everything down is surrounding yourself with people who only know how to agree. It feels smooth at first, less friction, fewer arguments. But it's deceptive, because progress doesn't come from comfort, it comes from collision with reality. The personality that fits this world isn't impressed by authority, titles, or momentum. They care about whether an idea actually works. They don't challenge for attention, and they don't agree for approval. They listen carefully, run the logic all the way through, and then speak up when something doesn't add up, not loudly, not emotionally, just clearly. That matters, because when you're building at the edge of what's possible, small errors compound fast. Silence is expensive. What's rare is that they don't confuse disagreement with disloyalty. They're not trying to win points or assert dominance, they're trying to get to the truth faster. If the data changes, they change their mind. If a better argument shows up, they adopt it. There's no ego wrapped around being right. Only commitment to being accurate. They also don't outsource their thinking to the crowd. Trends, headlines, and social pressure don't decide their position for them. They form opinions internally based on first principles, and they're comfortable standing alone if that's where the logic leads. That independence creates trust because you know the agreement you get is real, not performative. In high-stakes environments, honesty beats harmony every time. You need people who will tell you when something's broken, even if it's inconvenient, especially if it's inconvenient. That kind of clarity prevents disasters you never see coming. Because when the cost of being wrong is high, independent thinking isn't optional, it's essential. Intensity has a way of stripping things down to what's real. When everything is moving fast and the stakes are high, there's no room for emotional whiplash. The personality that fits this world isn't numb, and it isn't detached, but it's grounded. There's a difference. Being grounded means you can feel pressure without broadcasting it, process stress without amplifying it, and stay functional when things are messy. A lot of people are fine when conditions are stable. The real test shows up when plans change overnight, when criticism gets loud, or when a decision doesn't have a clean answer. Some people externalize that tension. They create noise. They turn uncertainty into drama. That slows everything down. The person who belongs here does the opposite. They absorb complexity quietly and respond with clarity. What stands out is emotional self-regulation. They don't need constant reassurance to stay steady. They don't take every setback personally or interpret friction as failure. They understand that chaos is often just a byproduct of scale, not a signal to panic. That perspective keeps decision-making clean even when emotions are present. This kind of stability isn't passive. It's an active discipline. It means knowing when to speak and when not to, when to push and when to pause, when to acknowledge emotion and when to set it aside so the work can continue. That balance is rare and it's incredibly valuable. In environments where pressure's constant emotional volatility becomes a tax, it drains focus, fractures trust, and turns small problems into big ones. Emotional steadiness does the opposite. It compounds. It creates reliability. It makes everything around it work better. Because when everything feels urgent, the calmest mind in the room becomes the most powerful one. There's a big difference between being interested in a lifestyle and being committed to a mission. One is about how things look. The other is about why they exist at all. The personality that fits this world isn't optimizing for comfort, status, or appearances. They're optimizing for impact. They wake up thinking about what needs to be built, fixed, or pushed forward not how it will be perceived. That doesn't mean they don't appreciate good things. It means those things aren't the driver. When the work demands sacrifice, time, energy, certainty, they don't see it as a personal cost. They see it as part of the equation. Missions that matter are rarely efficient in the short term. They're messy, non-linear, and often misunderstood. This kind of person doesn't lose motivation when the rewards are delayed or invisible. What's important is how they frame effort. They're not chasing business or clout. They're selective, deliberate, and clear on why they're involved. When something gets hard, they don't ask, is this still comfortable? They ask, is this still worth doing? That single question filters out a lot of noise and keeps focus where it belongs. They're also willing to operate outside conventional scripts. Timelines don't intimidate them. Expectations don't define them. If the mission requires patience, they have it. If it requires intensity, they can sustain it. They don't need constant novelty to stay engaged. Meaning does the work. In high-impact environments, lifestyle-first thinking creates drag. Mission-first thinking creates momentum. It aligns decisions, simplifies trade-offs, and keeps energy pointed in one direction. You can build something enduring with that mindset, because when purpose leads, comfort stops being the deciding factor. Ego is one of the most expensive inefficiencies you can introduce into any system. It slows feedback, distorts decision-making, and turns solvable problems into personal battles. The personality that actually works here doesn't need to protect an image. They're not trying to win every interaction or prove they're the smartest person in the room. They're trying to make things work. What that looks like in practice is accountability without defensiveness. When something breaks, they don't immediately look for someone else to blame. They look at the system and their role in it, not because they're self-critical, but because that's where leverage is. If you can identify what you could have done better, you can improve it next time. That mindset accelerates learning. They're also comfortable not getting credit. Not because they don't care about impact, but because they care more about outcomes than recognition. They understand that in complex environments, visibility and contribution don't always line up. Sometimes the most important work happens quietly, and that's fine. The work still counts. What really sets them apart is how quickly they update. When new information shows up, they adjust without turning it into an identity crisis. Being wrong isn't a threat. It's data. That flexibility matters because rigid thinking under changing conditions is a liability. Low ego keeps the system adaptive. This doesn't mean low standards. It means the standards are applied inward first. They expect a lot from themselves before they expect it from anyone else. That creates trust. You know they're not posturing. You know they're not hiding. In environments where speed and accuracy matter, ego becomes drag and accountability becomes propulsion. Because when responsibility is automatic, progress doesn't have to fight resistance. There's a misconception that to belong in a fast-moving world, you have to merge completely into it, to give up your own direction and just orbit someone else's momentum. That never works. The personality that truly fits here is already in motion. They're building, learning, evolving on their own terms, not in competition, not in imitation, but in parallel. What makes this dynamic work is independence without detachment. They don't need to be carried, and they don't need to be constantly synchronized step for step. Growth isn't always symmetrical. There are moments when one person is accelerating and the other is stabilizing, moments when priorities shift and focus changes. That doesn't create insecurity for them. They understand that long-term alignment isn't about matching speed, it's about sharing direction. They're comfortable with change because they've built an internal foundation that doesn't crack every time circumstances shift. When the environment evolves, they evolve with it. New information, new constraints, new opportunities, adapt quickly without losing themselves in the process. That flexibility keeps everything moving forward instead of getting stuck negotiating limits. What matters most is that they're choosing growth, not clinging to familiarity. They're not asking anyone to slow down so they can keep up, and they're not slowing themselves down to avoid friction. That mutual forward motion creates trust. You know the relationship is based on choice, not dependency, on respect, not necessity. In worlds where scale increases and pressure compounds, stagnation is the real risk. The ability to grow alongside change, to expand without losing stability, is what keeps things aligned over time. Because the strongest partnerships aren't built on balance in every moment, but on momentum in the same direction.